Okay, we're in Perek Tes, which is discussing inyanim of Teffilah. And the very last thing, well, we look at the last thing we looked at, if you remember, this is Sif Tes in Perek Tes, that when a person is mevakesh from Hashem in Teffilah, even though it looks like we're asking for all sorts of gashmias, we're asking for this, parnasa, refuah, he says the main thing are two things that you're asking for, and that is the siyata dishmaya to grow in ruchnias. Now this takes two forms. One is that Hakodesh Baruch Hu should protect you from committing averos, and the second is he should give you inspiration to do mitzvahs and to learn Torah and to be zeicha to olam haba, right? Just like David HaMelech says, there is a sur meira v'yaseh tov, right? Turn away from bad and do good. So memela, the shmira from averos is a tefillah for sur meira, and the tefillah that you should be zeicha to get olam haba, that's the bechina of aseh tov. Now we did explain last week, just to go over it very quickly, that avada, this doesn't mean that I can pray to Hakodesh Baruch Hu, that I shouldn't do averos. What does that mean? Akol b'dei shemayim chutz miyireh shemayim. Hashem does not stop me from doing averos. And it's also true that I can't be mispalel. Hashem, make me do mitzvahs, make me learn. Hakodesh Baruch Hu is not going to make you learn, because once again, it's totally in bechira. But the thing is that Hakodesh Baruch Hu puts into our lives all sorts of experiences, all sorts of people that we meet, and those people or those experiences can push us in one direction or the other. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu determines what we will experience in life. So the getter is, since Chazal say, B'derech shadam retzeh leilech malichan, I say, the way you want to go is the way Hashem will lead you. So when a person is mispalel that Hashem should protect him from chait, what is he really mispalel for? He's not mispalel, God, stop me from sinning. God is not going to stop you from sinning. But Hashem, keep me away from experiences that will drag down. And that you can ask for, because by showing HaKadosh Baruch Hu that you want to be on the derech hatov, that gives you a zechus that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will keep you away from those things that drag you down. And similarly for mitzvahs, you're mispalel that you should be exposed to the hashpais in the world that bring you to a good place. So these tefillahs are tefillahs of ruchnias, meaning even the gashmias, parnasa, health, all of these inyanim are that I should not turn away from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's the one thing that you're mispalel for, this inyan of ruchnias, the inyan of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that you shouldn't come to chait. And you'll remember that the Gra says that this is the meaning of the passage in Uval Tzion that we say every day at the end of davening, may it be your will, Hashem, shenishmar chukecha b'aylam hazeh, that we should be shaimer, we should observe your laws in this world, but lishmar is always a leisasa, meaning we should not transgress any of your laws. So that's the tefillah, that we should be nishmar, we should be protected from chait. And then it says, v'niske, v'nichya, v'nira, that we should be zeicha to olam haba. That's the bechina of sur, of aseh tov, right? So those are the three things. Yehi ratzayin, shenishmar chukecha, that's keneged, protection from the Yetzer Hara. V'niske, v'nichya is that we should be zeicha to olam haba, by the mitzvos and the Torah that we learn, right? So that was his point about the Iker Bakasha in Tefillah. What should a person focus on? Then the next one I think we also did, just very quickly, just 2 lines, and that is every day that you daven Musaf, you have a neshama yisera. Okay, so we know that Chazal tell us that on Shabbos we have a neshama yisera. And I think, as I said, neshama yisera should not be understood as a double soul. Like, until now I had one soul, now I get another soul, like I'm schizophrenic or something. But neshama yisera means your neshama gets expanded. It's one neshama that gets bigger. You get a bigger yecheles to absorb Ruchnius and Kedusha. And that's the gift of Neshama Yisera, that a person can understand on Shabbos in Ruchnius things that he would not be able to understand or comprehend or feel during the week. Now, once again, that's not a done deal. That doesn't mean you will understand those inyanim or feel those inyanim. You have to work on it, but it means your capacity, your yechelis, to absorb those inyanim is much, much greater on Shabbos. That's the Neshama Yisera. Now, there is interesting, I'm just thinking, there is a machlekes about Yom Tov. Do you have a Neshama Yisera on Yom Tov? Because here's the shaila. The shaila is like this. We have besamim when we leave Motzei Shabbos, right? We finish, we make Havdalah, so we make a bracha over besamim. So the ikar reason why we make a bracha over besamim is because we had a Neshama Yisera, it kind of left us, we feel weaker, we feel faint, we feel shvach, we feel depressed. Mimela, you have to have besamim to revive you. Remember, the bracha b'rei minei besamim is not a birchas mitzvah, it's a bracha on reich. I mean, if you smell spices during the week, you make b'rei minei besamim. In other words, it's not a special mitzvah thing, but it's the Chazal were misakein that the birchas hanenin of besamim one should make Motzei Shabbos because they've lost their neshama yisera. So now the question is, when it's Motzei Yom Tov, let's say Yom Tov is whatever, like let's say Pesach, right? So Pesach was Monday night, Tuesday, the first day. So Tuesday night we made Havdalah. Did we have besamim Tuesday night? So the halach is we don't have besamim Motzei Yom Tov. Why not? So some Rishonim say, the Gemara doesn't give a reason, but some Rishonim say, because on Yom Tov you don't have a Neshama Yisera. The Neshama Yisera is only a gift for Shabbos. It's not a gift for Yom Tov. Now, the Gra would vaday be chaylik in that, because the Gra says that any day that has Musaf, that even includes Chol HaMoed and Rosh Chodesh, Kal v'chaymer Yom Tov. But okay. But on the standard explanation, there's no Neshama Yisera on Yom Tov, you have a kasha. And the kasha is Yak Nahaz. When you go from Shabbos to Yom Tov, you go from Shabbos to Yom Tov. So you have to combine Kiddush for the Yom Tov with the Havdalah for leaving Shabbos. And there's a special Seder Hadvarim. The Gemara has many different combinations. There are many different Mandiyamrim. What's the exact order? But the halacha is very clear. The halacha is the Seder called Yak Nahaz. So Yak Nahaz, Yayin, Borei Pri Hagafen, Kiddush of Yom Tov, Ner, Borei Moreo Eish, because on Yom Tov you're allowed to transfer fire, not on Shabbos. Havdalah, which is not Hamavdil ben Kodesh l'Chol, but it's Hamavdil ben Kodesh l'Kodesh. And then Zman, which is Shechiyanu. Yak Nahaz is when you go from Shabbos to Yom Tov. Yak Nahaz. So you'll notice that you don't make besamim. There's no besamim in Yak Nahaz. So l'chayre, there's a stira. If you're telling me that when I leave Yom Tov, I don't have besamim because there's no neshama yisera, Ebazai, when I go from Shabbos to Yom Tov, I seem to be losing the neshama yisera. So l'chayre, I should have. In other words, there's an inherent contradiction in these two halachas. That Motzei Yom Tov, I don't have besamim. Why? So you're telling me because I don't have a neshama yisera. If that's the case, when I go from Shabbos to Yom Tov, there ought to be besamim in Yak Nahaz, because I don't have the neshama yisera, I'm losing it. So some answer, Eina Chinami, you lose the neshama yisera, but the extra food and simcha you have on Yom Tov, that takes the place of the besamim. So Eina Chinami, you don't have a neshama yisera. But the Sfas Emes, Taka says differently, very beautiful. He says, Avada, you have a neshama yisera on Yom Tov. Who says you don't have a neshama yisera on Yom Tov? But the neshama yisera of Yom Tov never goes away. Wow. So Mimela, the reason why I don't have besamim Motzei Yom Tov is not because I didn't have a neshama yisera. It's lahepach. The neshama yisera I got on Yom Tov doesn't go away. And that's why in Yak Nahaz, when I go from Shabbos to Yom Tov, I don't have to have besamim, because I still have that neshama yisera. So that's an amazing thing. That's a special gift of Yom Tif, that there's a certain aliyah. Now what that means is everything builds on itself. Because if the pshat is every Yom Tif gives me a neshama yisera, then when next Shabbos comes, it's going to get bigger, but I'll lose that one, right? But I still have that gift that I got on Yom Tif. So, be it as it may, though, it's very, very clear that the Gra is vadai cholek on the opinions that say there's no neshama yisera on Yom Tif, because he actually says that every day that there's a musaf. In fact, this is a bit of a play on words. The word musaf means additional, right? Musaf. So that's the pshat. It's called a musaf because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is meisif in your neshama an additional kayach called neshama yisera. Of course, why don't you make a besamim every Motzei Rosh Chodesh? I should make besamim because I had a neshama yisera that I'm losing, unless he holds that. That stays too. I don't know. And the Gra then is meisif that the meaning of the neshama yisera is called taisefes Ruach Hakodesh. You get an additional measure of Ruach Hakodesh. Wow, an additional measure of Ruach Hakodesh. I didn't know I had the first measure of Ruach Hakodesh. I get an additional measure of Ruach Hakodesh. But the emes is, this ties in with something else that the Gra says. It's not brought here actually, but it's in the Perush and Mishlei, that every single Yid, every single Jew, has Ruach HaKodesh. All of us have Ruach HaKodesh. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is like speaking to us, is giving us hadracha. But the pshat is that it's like static. The signal, the radio signal, is distorted by everything else that's going on. Our taivas, our jealousies, our negias. So we don't hear the clarity of the message. We don't hear it, Pashut. But the Ruach HaKodesh is there. And if you could find a way to get rid of the static, you would have this bechina of nevuah that is within you. That's why I think I mentioned to you, B'Shem Rav Chaim of Volozhiner, that when a person has a mevucha, a person is confused about a life decision. Where should they move? Should they stay in yeshiva? Should they go to another yeshiva? Any type of issue that a person is grappling with, they should learn for 2 hours, and that kind of clears them out, that cleans them up. And then whatever comes in your mind after learning straight for 2 hours, that's going to be your Ruach HaKodesh. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is being madrich. Now somebody told me they saw a different girsa, which is much harder. It has to be for 12 hours. I'm not sure. Apparently there's the shaylas at 2 hours or 12 hours. That's a big nafkamina. But still, the bechina is that ultimately, when you clean out all of the distractions, your shikol hadas is going to be Ruach HaKodesh. This is really the explanation, ultimately, for the concept of Daas Torah. You know, one of the big things that divides, what you might say, the yeshivish world and the, let's say, the modern Orthodox world. I mean, at least in theory, persons modern Orthodox, they keep, in theory at least, they keep the Shulchan Aruch, they keep halacha. Again, in theory, and Baruch Hashem, there are many in practice as well. But one of the major divisions, ideologically, is this concept of Daas Torah. Daas Torah means that you go to a gadol not only in matters of halacha, but in matters of hashkafa, like where should I send my children, what type of chinuch should we have? Because many, I don't want to make it a modern Orthodox thing, but many people who are from sometimes say the following. They say, listen, I know Rav Chaim Kanevsky knows Shulchan Aruch better than me. I know he knows Shas better than me. Okay, I know that. So Memela, if there's a shaila, what the Gemara means, or what the Shulchan Aruch means, so I know he's better than me. But a lot of questions in life don't have Gemaras that cover them, don't have a Shulchan Aruch that covers them. They're what you call opinions. So people will taina, what makes his opinion better than my opinion? He thinks this is not a good thing, I think it is a good thing. Who says he's right? Now, this is where the Inyan of Daas Torah. So Daas Torah basically says if a person is a gadol that is shakua in Torah and Avodas Hashem, and again, there's a little bit of a question. Not every synagogue rabbi or avrech or younger man, can qualify for that necessarily. That's a whole other question. Like, is everybody Daas Torah? Okay, but let's assume we're talking about gedolim. Daas Torah says even on inyanim that are not beferish in Shulchan Aruch, inyanim of hashkafa, inyanim of opinion, inyanim in which he doesn't have a raya. Like, where does it say? He doesn't have a raya. He says, li b'yomer li. His daya is more valuable than my daya. And one might ask, why is that so? It is a legitimate logical problem. Why is his opinion better than my opinion? Why? But like the Gra, you really have a very good hesber, because the emes is, every person, B'etzem, has Ruach Hakodesh. Hashem is telling us what to do. But most of us cannot access the Ruach HaKodesh because we have so many other things going on. So the person who purifies himself by his learning and his mitzvahs, so even on inyanim that he never studied, he doesn't know anything directly about, his judgment is going to have a bechina of Ruach HaKodesh. You see? If Rav Chaim Volozhiner says, if I learn 2 hours straight, I'll have kind of a Ruach HaKodesh. What about somebody who learns 40 hours straight, 40 years straight, whatever it would be? There's certainly going to be a strong element of Ruach HaKodesh. So in many, many ways, Daas Torah is connected to maybe it's a lower level, I wouldn't call it Nevuah, but to some level of Ruach HaKodesh that comes by a person who gives his life to Torah and Avodas Hashem. Now, as I say, there is a question like, does everybody who learned qualify for this inyan of Daas Torah? It's like imagine you have an older chavrusa, he says, gotta listen to me, Daas Torah. At some point we have to make, chilukim, and I don't want to get into it. It is a hard question. It's not so pashut. But at least at some level, it vaday does exist. And the getter is the getter of Ruach, the getter of Ruach HaKodesh. In fact, it's Yadua. It's a famous word. I think Rabbi Soslanter. When Rishonim are trying to be machriya halacha, what's the halacha in a given case? So, Rishon, let's say the Rosh, for example. When the Rosh says, so sometimes the Rosh will say the halacha is so and so, and this is the raya. My raya is from this Gemara. And other times, a Rishon will say nireh li. Yira'el li. Doesn't bring a raya, but just says, this is what I think is right. So Rabbi Soslanter used to point out, which do you think is a stronger conclusion? So you might say in Pashut Pshat, the one with the raya is stronger. When he brings a raya, that's stronger. When he just says, this is how I feel, in fact, even the Lashon, li bi omer li, even that Lashon you'll find, my heart tells me. So you might think that a li b'yomer li is much schwacher than a raya. A raya is a much stronger thing. Rabbi Soslanter says it's the opposite. When a rishon is machriya based on a raya, he's simply saying my conclusion is only as strong as the raya. Now rayas, the Ramban points out in the Milchamas Hashem, the Ramban points out that rayas, can be interpreted many, many ways. So you hold it's a raya, I could be deicha the raya. Right? Rayas can almost always be nitcha one way or the other. But li b'yomer li is a different thing. Li b'yomer li says, this is the conclusion that comes out of the mitzias of all of the Torah that I learned, all of the avodah that shaped my consciousness, that shaped my heart, that shaped my seichel, that shaped my shikol hadas. It doesn't come from the one thing, one source. It comes from everything. So Rabbi Soslanter said, that's actually the strongest thing, because that is not a raya-based idea. That is the achra of seichel. This comes up a lot. I'll give you an example. In the early years of the State of Israel, as you know, the issue of B'nai Torah going into the army is a controversial issue, and I don't want to get into the politics and the struggles and some of the compromises that might be made.
But Ben Gurion agreed to it in 1948. 1948, the establishment of the State of Israel. Ben Gurion needed some religious parties in the government, Hakodesh Israel, and he made a deal, and one of the deal was that people who are learning full-time don't have to go to the army. That was a deal. Now, why did Ben Gurion agree to that? Why did he agree to it? The answer was, in 1948, the total number of people learning in yeshivas was less than 500 people. Maybe it was 200 people. Ben Gurion had a hashkafa that that's not going to grow. It's only, he thought this is the last generation of yeshivas. They're going to be gone in 10 years. So therefore, I'll let them have it. I need them for voting. I'll let them have it. So Ben Gurion was not masik that you would have, Baruch Hashem, so many people. Had he known, he never would have been masik. But he was masik because he thought they're going to disappear. Who cares? So then Ben Gurion wanted to go weiter. Mailin Bakaider, Maridin Bakaider here. He wanted to draft women. He says, why should women be exempt from the army? Women, Giyos Vadas. Yeah, okay, we'll make an exception. They won't fight in combat, but he wanted Giyos Habanes. So at the time, the Gedalim in Eretz Yisrael were very, very, very perturbed about Giyos Habanes. The Chazon Ish, in fact, this is the famous thing. No, the Chazon Ish had a meeting with Ben Gurion. Ben Gurion came to Bnei Brak. Famous meeting. The Brisker Rav was very upset. The Brisker Rav didn't. How can you meet with Ben Gurion? You're giving legitimacy. And the Brisker Rav had a big pachad, but he said, the Chazon Ish is the Chazon Ish. I can't give him orders. But the Brisker Rav was misnage to the meeting. But Ben Gurion came to the Chazon Ish, and there are even some pictures you could find. Ben Gurion wore a hat and whatever, covered it. What was the shaila? So the Chazon Ish put out cake, where the Rosh HaMemshala comes, but I think he put it out and Ben Gurion couldn't reach it or something because, you don't make a bracha, so, you're not supposed to give directly. It was a whole maisa. And Ben Gurion asked a question. He says, again, it's a good question. I'm not going to say it's a foolish question. He says, where does it say in the Shulchan Aruch that women cannot do Sheirut Leumi, national service? Let's say we're not talking about combat duty. We're talking about being secretaries, working as nurses in hospitals. He says they do that anyway. They do that anyway in the Haredi world. A girl has a job. A girl is a nurse. A girl is a cook. A girl is a teacher. So what is the shanda if she's doing it in the army? Same thing she would do outside of the army. And the Chazon Ish had written, it's Yehareg Vel Yavor. He had written that for a girl to go into the army in any capacity is a getter of Giloy Arayas, because you can come to that, and therefore a person is obligated to die before they do it. Yehareg Vel Yavor. And then Gurion said, what? He knew something. He came from a European background. Not like today, right? Today, the Chilonim are just totally ignorant. Ben Gurion is the old-time apikoros who, he knew stuff. He had some yeshiva education. And the Chazon Ish basically said it's like the fifth chiluk of Shulchan Aruch, meaning a gadol is margish that certain inyanim, it's hard to explain even, certain inyanim are dangerous to Klal Yisrael. They lead to certain consequences, and therefore you have to avoid them. So the modern Orthodox mentality often is, show me the source, show me the place. And the gadol cannot always show a place. It's a judgment, it's a feeling, it's a regesh. So some people say, well, if it's a feeling, your feeling is no better than my feeling, right? That's the taina. But the answer is, yeah, that feeling is better than your feeling, because it's a feeling that's mushrash in all of the Torah. So that's what we mean by Daas Torah, and Daas Torah is actually a major dividing point between, let's say, the yeshiva Torah world and the more modern Orthodox world, which does give allegiance, hopefully, to the Shulchan Aruch. They'll keep the halachas, not always, but they'll keep the halachas in the Shulchan Aruch, but the idea of Daas Torah they don't totally accept. Now again, I'm not saying that Daas Torah is a monolith, because even among Gedolei Torah there are chilukei deos. So the fact that this Daas Torah comes out this way, and this Daas Torah comes out another way, I don't mean at all to say that one is wrong and one is right. There are Elu v'Elu Divrei Elokim Chayim, so I'm not disparaging Gedolim on any side. I mean, there are Gedolim in modern Orthodoxy too, Rav Soloveitchik, Rav Lichtenstein, and the like, so I'm not getting into that issue. But the notion that Daas Torah gives a Gadol B'Torah, a superior understanding of the world, that would be mushrash in the Gra's idea of Ruach Hakodesh. But the good thing is that even we get a shtickle Ruach Hakodesh. Well, we have it all the time, and it's a Yom Sheyesh by Musaf. There's a Tesefes of that Ruach Hakodesh. Okay. Yeah. So now we're up to Yud Beis. He says, Kol amunosenu hu b'shem Havaya Baruch Hu, shu shem ha'etzem, she'eno mayra mipu'ula, rak mayra al haviyasai tamid, v'haviyasav me'atzmai. He says the Ikar Shem, Hashem has many names, but the Ikar Shem of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that we use in our Teffilah, although we don't pronounce it as such, is Yud Kei Vav Kei. We pronounce it as Adnos, but really it's Yud Kei Vav Kei. That's why a sitter properly, in different siddurim, should spell out Yud Kei Vav Kei. Now Yud Kei Vav Kei is a Shem that we don't pronounce, but it is said that Yud Kei Vav Kei is called the Shem Ha'etzem of Hashem. That means the actual name of Hashem, as opposed to Elokim and Shakai, which are referring to HaKadosh Baruch Hu's actions and not HaKadosh Baruch Hu's essences. So Elokim is Baal HaKochos, Elokim, the master of all power. Shakai is the one who created the world and told it to stop. Amar Le'olam Odai. Rachum, Chanun, Hashem is merciful, Hashem is gracious. These are Shemais that refer to Hashem's actions, His attributes, but they are not the Etzem, Mitzias Hashem. Shem Havaya, however, Yud Kei Vav Kei, is the Shem HaEtzem, because what does it mean? It comes from Haya, Hove, B'yiyah. He exists. He exists. That's the one thing that is Hashem's essence. There is an Eibishter in the world. You know, this is again a famous teaching, and it's interesting. Hasidim say it in the name of the Baal Shem Tov, and Rav Chaim Volozhner says it in the Nefesh HaChaim. So both Hasidim and Misnagdim have the same teaching. In the pasuk, Ein Oid Milvadei, Atah Hareisha Ladas. This is in Beis Chanan. Atah Hareisha Ladas, Ki Hashem Hu Elokim. You were shown that Hashem. See, what does it mean? Even that Hashem Yud Kei Vav Kei is Elokim. That means Elokim means the source of all power. It is only Havaya that is the source of all power. That's how you translate it. Ein Oid Milvadei. Ein Oid. There is nothing besides Hashem. So the Baal Shem Tov and the Nefesh HaChaim say, it doesn't just mean there is no other God besides God. It means there's no other thing besides God. We exist only because at this very moment. It's not that Hashem created us, and then we have independent existence, and He could destroy us, but we exist on our own. Lehepech. I'm not alive this second because I was alive a second ago. I'm alive this second only because the Ratzon Hashem is coming into me. There is nothing. I am nothing. There is nothing. I am other than Hashem's Ratzon. Ein Od Milvadei. The Baal Shem Tov says it. Rav Chaim Volozhner says it. The Baal Tanya elaborates on the Baal Shem Tov's Maimer. I heard from a Chabad Shaliach, who was a Rav of a shul. There are non-Chabad houses. There are many Chabad Shluchim who are mamish Rabbanim of regular shuls. Interesting. And he said this helps him a lot because he has a very difficult president that he doesn't get along with very well. And he has to daven next to the president. And whenever he gets upset, he always says, Ein oid milvadei, this president really isn't here. He's not a separate Metzias. He says, that makes it very easier for me, just not here. Okay? Ein oid milvadei. So, in this connection, the Nefesh HaChaim is not a book about segulas. It's not like a Hasidic book, drink this, or walk around Kever Rachel with the red string. But there actually is one segula in the Nefesh HaChaim, where he says that if a person is facing tsaras, enemies, dangers, adversities, they should be kaiveya in their machshava. Ein oid milvada. There is no kayach in the world other than Hakodesh Baruch Hu. The people who want to hurt me are kind of imaginations. And by a person being kaiveya, ein oid milvada, Rav Chaim Volozhner says he will be nitzel from all of the tsaras. In other words, in a sense, it's like the idea that if in your mind you give those mafriim an existence, then ki'ilu they have an existence. When you realize that they don't really exist independently, that takes away their koyach, meaning they become real by virtue of your machshava that they're real. Now again, I'm not going to make any promise this is going to work every case. Maybe you have to be in a certain madrega, you have to really mean it. But he said, if you're machavein ein oid milvadei, you will be nitzel from many, many, many tzaras. This is in the Nefesh HaChaim, Pashat. He has the words to say, Ani koveya belibi, ein oid milvadei, etc. So they say the Maisa with the Brisker Rav was this. The Brisker Rav, this is the last Rav of Brisk, right? The Brisker Rav, there were three Soloveitchiks who were the Rabbanim of Brisk. We had the Beis Halevi, was the first Soloveitchik, the Rav of Brisk. He was succeeded by his son, Rav Chaim, and Rav Chaim was succeeded by his son, Rav Yitzchak Ze'ev, Rav Velvel. And typically when we say, just to give you a little biographical information, when we say the Brisker Rav, most of the time we mean Rav Velvel, because he was the last Rav of Brisk. Then came the Holocaust, and there's no longer a community in Brisk. It actually is a Jewish guy in Brisk still. There's one Jew left in Brisk, who's Shomer Shabbos. One Shomer Shabbos Jew left in Brisk. Well, probably not now, but a few years ago. There was an elderly man. His children were in Eretz Yisrael. He certainly could have left. He felt an achrayus to maintain the cemetery, which had chashuva people in the cemetery, although not Rav Chaim. Rav Chaim is buried in Warsaw, but there were chashuva people in Brisk, and to keep a shul open for visitors and the like. So he literally stayed, last from Jew in Brisk. He felt he had to make that sacrifice. So the Brisker Rav, Rav Velvel, was in the Warsaw Ghetto for part of World War II. Now the Warsaw Ghetto, as you know, was totally destroyed, but he was smuggled out before the ghetto was destroyed. And at some point, he was smuggled out, almost b'derech neis. I believe, I don't want to say for sure because I don't know if I'm 100% accurate, that he had to shave his beard. Basically, he had to disguise himself as a Polish goy in order to get out. But he got out, and the idea was he was going to be smuggled into Switzerland. For money, there were smugglers who would take you into Switzerland, and Switzerland, of course, was neutral. Now, I always have a big kasha. I don't know why. Swiss neutrality seems to be Kodesh HaKodashim. Even Hitler, Yimach Shemo. Switzerland, no, neutral. I don't know why. Hitler didn't care about anything. But Swiss neutrality, you cannot violate. So once somebody got into Switzerland, they were safe. So, and these were smugglers. They would find ways of driving in and out, and you had to pay bribes all over the place. So the Brisker Rav, who had already lost his Rebbetzin and some children, he was taking some of his younger children with him in this car. And it was very, very dangerous. You had to drive really hundreds of miles through occupied Nazi lands until you got to Switzerland. And there were checkpoints all the time, and they asked for your papers. And the Brisker Rav had papers, but the papers, were not professional, so a good guard could tell that they were fake and the like. So the Brisker Rav told his children, don't stop thinking about Ein Od Milvadei, because the Brisker Rav was the great-great-grandson of Rav Chaim Volozhner. It's a direct relationship. And he says, Kol Zaman, we're connected to the Ein Od Milvadei. They're not going to be able to hurt us. And they were going through checkpoint after checkpoint after checkpoint after checkpoint. They were just waving him through. And Baruch Hashem, they were almost in Switzerland. The last checkpoint, all of a sudden, a guard said, stop the car, I want to see the papers. Tremendous pachad, because if they had to check the papers, it could very well be that would be the end. They would shoot them on the spot. They would just murder them right then. So the Brisker Rav whispers to his son, did you stop thinking of Ein Od Milvadei? And the son said, I did stop because I was scared. I saw all the guards there, the last border crossing. I was frightened. So the Brisker Rav said, go back, think of it, keep on thinking of it. And he went back to daven, Ein Od Milvadei, and the guard that was about to check the papers, the other one said, we're off duty now. This is the end of our shift. I want to get home. I haven't eaten for 6 hours. Let him go. Who cares? Another car goes to Switzerland. Big deal. The last minute they were saved. That's how he got into safety. This idea of Ein Od Milvadei. And that's the Shem Havaya. The Shem Havaya means only God exists. Everything else is only almost a figment of Hashem's imagination. Hashem thinks about you, therefore you're here, etc. So that is the getter of the Shem Havaya, and that's why it is called the Shem HaEtzem. Now I want to point out this is a little different than people often say. People often say Shem Havaya is Midas HaRachamim, and Shem Elokim is Midas Hadin. That's a very common idea. But this is a little different, but I'll show you the connection. Shem Havaya is the Shem HaEtzem. It is the actual essence of God. Shem Elokim and other Shemais are the Pu'ulais, the attributes and behaviors of Hashem. So we have these two translations, so to speak, or two interpretations of the Shem Havaya. One is it is the Shem HaEtzem, and the other is it is the Midah of Rachamim. But in reality, it's kind of the same, because what it's basically saying is Hashem's essential Metzias is one of Rachamim. So even though we experience Rachamim and we experience Din, but the Din itself is Rachamim, covered up. Meaning, coming from Havaya, it's all Rachamim. Some Rachamim goes in the pathway of Rachamim, and some Rachamim come in the pathway of Din. But it's all Rachamim, you see? So it's not a stira. The Shem HaEtzem and the Midah of Rachamim is Haba HaTalya. I'll mention another Chabad Maisa about this. This is very Nogeya this week. This week, we're going to read the Teichacha. The Teichacha is very frightening. The Teichacha says if Klal Yisrael doesn't keep the mitzvahs, a lot of bad things are going to happen. Destruction, poverty, exile, disease, sickness, death, slavery, enslavement. Awful, awful, awful things. There are two Teichachas in the Torah. One is the Teichacha at the end of Vayikra, and the other is the Teichacha at the end of Devarim, Kisavai. So the Teichacha of Vayikra we read before Shavuos. The Teichacha of Devarim we read before Rosh Hashanah. This is how the Jewish calendar is structured. There is a famous Ramban. It's not relevant to what we're talking about, but I'll mention it. The Ramban has a very important yesod that the Teichacha in Vayikra that we're going to read this week is really prophetically describing the Chorban and the Galus of the Bayis Rishon. So if you trace the history of what happened in the Bayis Rishon, A lot of the stuff is in the Teichacha in Vayikra. The Teichacha in Devarim is Mechuven Keneged the Churban Bayis Sheni and the aftermath of the Galus, which we're in now. So if you want to match up the Teichacha to current events, according to the Ramban, you would look at Devarim more than Vayikra. But either way, this is the Teichacha, and it reminds us of the awful consequences of what happens when Klal Yisrael leaves the Torah. It doesn't mean this will happen every day, but in the course of the history, these things are going to happen. Many of them have happened. Some of them are happening now. The Teichacha. So they tell a story about the Mittler Rebbe. The Mittler Rebbe was the second Chabad Rebbe, right? The first Chabad Rebbe was the Baal HaTanya, Rav Shneur Zalman, who's called the Alter Rebbe. His son was called the Middle Rebbe. Why is he called the Middle Rebbe? Because the third Rebbe of Chabad was the Tzemach Tzedek, who was a very famous Paisek even among non-Chabad people. In fact, he gave smicha to the Aruch HaShulchan. And both the Alter Rebbe and the Tzemach Tzedek were Rebbes for more than 30 years. The Mittler Rebbe was only Rebbe for a short time, so he's called the middle one. He joins the two. He's between the two Rebbes of 30 years. So the Mittler Rebbe, though, whose name was Rav Dov Ber, the Alter Rebbe named him after his Rebbe, the Mezoritcher Maggid, Rav Dov Ber, the Baal Shem Tov's Talmud. And the Mittler Rebbe was a very, very sensitive person. And one time the Baal Kaireh is reading the Teichacha. And the Mittler Rebbe, he was not the Rebbe then, he was so overwhelmed with the suffering and the pain that he couldn't take it. He fainted. He fainted away, and he had to be revived because he was margish, the pain of Klal Yisrael. So that shows you his hargasha. But he gets revived, but then somebody asked him a real good kasha. He says, hey, this is not the first time you heard the Teichacha read. You hear it read every year, and you actually hear it twice a year, Vayikra and Kisavai. You never fainted before. So I don't get it. I understand you're sensitive, you're margish, you feel the tsar of Klal Yisrael. But why now? Why not all the other times? So the Mittler Rebbe said, well, usually my father's the Baal Kaireh, the Baal HaTanya was the Baal Kaireh. When my father read the Teichacha, it just didn't sound so bad. But my father's out of town. The Alter Rebbe wasn't there that Shabbos. So this is the first time I heard the Teichacha from someone other than my father. I said, wow, this is awful. So he fainted only when somebody else read the Teichacha. He never fainted when his father read the Teichacha. When his father read the Teichacha, it didn't sound so bad. So what's the pshat? What's the pshat in all of this? The answer is, in the Teichacha itself, like every part of the Torah, there is what is called chitzonius, something external, and there is what we call panemius. The chitzonius of the Teichacha is rejection, anger, hester panim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu punishes us. It looks like HaKadosh Baruch Hu hates us. But that's only b'chitzonius. In the panemius, the Teichacha itself comes out of love. Shlomo HaMelech says, Ki es asher ya'ahav Hashem yochiach. Hashem chastises those that he loves the most. He wants us to be the best that we can. He wants us to be pure. He wants us to be holy. He wants us to do tshuva. So if we don't get the message in the kinder ways, there will be discipline that kind of pushes us into tshuva. But it comes from love. You know, l'mashal, if you see somebody else's child misbehaving, you may very well not intervene. Just on this day and age, you try to correct somebody else's child, the parents may call the police on you or have you arrested or whatever it will be. So you'll let that kid do whatever he's doing. When your child is doing something, you're going to be a bit stricter. So the child might think, oh, how come you're so mean to me and you're so nice to those other kids? He says, you're my child. I love you more. Therefore, I'm more concerned about how you become and where you're going. So Goyim might be able to get away with a whole lot of stuff. And Hashem is not necessarily going to bring all of these ancient. But for Klal Yisrael, out of the love that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has for Klal Yisrael, he gives us the discipline and the chastisements and the teichachas. But not because he hates us, but because he loves us. Now I understand emotionally. How can you explain the Holocaust as love? I hear that it's difficult for us to be masing. But on the most fundamental level, the Midas Hadin and the Midas Harachim both come from the Shem Havaya. And the Shem Havaya is Mugdar as Midas Harachim. And therefore, when the Balatanya read the Teichacha, he was able to communicate the panemius of the Teichacha, which is the magnitude of Hashem's love for Klal Yisrael. So Mamela, the Mittler Rebbe, wasn't margish that it was as bad as it sounds. The other Baal Koreh, who I'm sure was a chashuv a person, he must have been, but he was not able to communicate the panemius advarim. So the Mittler Rebbe is hearing the chitzonius without the panemius. He said, "Oy vey, this is so bad. I can't be saival." If you remember, the Gemara in Brachas says that when Moshe Rabbeinu said to Hashem after the Cheder Egel, "Haydieni na esterachacha," show me your ways. I want to understand your ways. So the Gemara in Brachas says Moshe Rabbeinu had a very specific question, and that is, why is it that tzaddikim suffer in this world and Rishayim prosper? This is called Tzaddik V'Ralo, Rasha V'Tayvlai. Why is there such din in the world, such einshim, such harshness for the Klal Yisrael and for the tzaddikim of Klal Yisrael? So HaKadosh Baruch Hu actually didn't answer him. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to him, "V'chanesi es asher achayin," I will have rachamim to whom I choose to have rachamim. V'richamti es asher arachim, which means even Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't get it. In fact, that's actually what the Gemara in the Dorim means when it says there are 50 levels of understanding. Hashem, Moshe was zocheh to 49. He was not zocheh to the 50th level. That 50th level is trying to understand the hashgacha of the mishpat of Hashem, why tzaddikim suffer. But what did Hashem do? Not only Hashem gave him that non-answer answer, meaning I'm not going to explain it, but he said to Moshe, I'm going to put you in a rock, in the cleft of a rock, the crack of a rock. I will put my hands, that's what it says, I'll put my palms over your eyes. I will pass by with my glory. After my glory passes by, I will remove my hands. You will see me from the back, and you will not see me, my face. You will not see me from the front. I'm just saying the pasuk. V'ra'isa es achorai. You will see me from the back. Upanai lo yeira'u. You will not see me from the front. So the Gemara has a strange drasha. Moshe Rabbeinu saw the kesher shel tefillin. In other words, Hashem wears tefillin. That we know from another Gemara. And in the back of your head tefillin, there's a knot. Some have it 2 knots, so it looks like a square. Others just have a knot that looks like a yud. But whether it's a 2-sided square knot or a yud knot, but there's a knot. And when it says, you will see me from the back, that means you, Moshe Rabbeinu, will see the kesher shel tefillin. If you remember Anim Zemiros, maybe in your prior life you said it every Shabbos. Here the Minhag HaGra is only to say it Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. But in Anim Zemiros, a very mystical song. So it says, Kesher Tefillin Hera Lianaf. Hashem showed the humble one, that's Moshe, the Kesher of Tefillin. Remember what the Gemara says. In our Tefillin, we have parshiyos that glorify HaKadosh Baruch Hu. that glorify HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What's in Hashem's tefillin? Mi ki amcha Yisrael, who is like your nation Yisrael, goyachid b'aretz. Okay. But what is the significance of the kesher of tefillin? Why is that important? So here is the thing. If you look at tefillin shel reish, so you have a kesher that's at the base of your skull, and two straps come from the kesher, one to your right and one to your left. Two straps that emanate from a single knot. In Kabbalah, the right side is chesed, loving kindness. The left side is gevura, strict judgment. So when I look at things from the front, I see a right and a left. I see hanhagos that are kind and gentle and beautiful. And then I see punishments, harshness. But when I see it from the back, I see that the rachamim and the din all come from a single place, which means from that kesher shel tefillin. So the kesher shel tefillin is really telling Moshe Rabbeinu that even my din is rachamim. Because the Shem Havaya, the atzmius, the essence of God, is rachamim. But as the rachamim comes into the world, some rachamim will go into the din category, behaviorally, and some of the rachamim will go into the rachamim, or the chesed category, that way. But it all emanates from rachamim. The rachamim, in fact, that's even the Shema. Shema Yisrael, the Kli Yakar says, Shema Yisrael, listen, listen. Hashem Elokeinu. Hashem is Shem Havaya, which is rachamim. Elokeinu is Midas Hadin. Elokeinu, from our perspective, I see rachamim and din. Hashem Echad, it's all the Shem Havaya, which is the midah of rachamim. Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. So the Vilna Gaon says that the reason why we daven b'Shem Havaya is because Klal Yisrael has a koyach to attach itself to the very essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We don't just attach ourselves by seeing this thing or that thing by Hashem's pa'ulos. We attach ourselves to Hashem's atzmios. Now again, this is a very abstract idea. We don't know exactly what that means, but he points out that when you look at the tefillahs of the Umos HaOlam that are in Tanakh, they refer to the greatness of Hashem, but they're not mishtamish b'Shem Havaya, because they can only connect to God by virtue of what He does in a physical world. They do not connect to the etzem mitzius of Hashem, which is the Shem Havaya and Yud Kei Vav Kei. In other words, I guess the point, I'm being kind of long-winded about it, but the point is that it's a mistake for people to simply say, as we always say, oh, Shem Havaya is rachamim. Because if it only meant the rachamim Hashem shows in the world, that would be a midah like every other midah. Rather, the idea that Shem Havaya is rachamim is a much deeper idea. It's not referring to the expression of rachamim. It's referring to the fact that Shem Havaya is the Yetzem Metzius of Hashem. And that Metzius is a Metzius of Rachamim, even though the manifestation in a Pa'ula may be a Midas Adin. Right? So it's a little different than people think. So therefore, Shem Havaya is the Shem Ha'etzem, and in that Shem Ha'etzem is a Rachamim, even though it's Niskala in Olam Hazeh, in a cover, in a mask of din, as opposed, let's say, to a name like Racham. When we say Hashem is Racham, that's describing a pu'ula of Rachamim in the world. But the Racham of Havaya is higher than that. That even the din and the gevura comes from a koyach that ultimately is Rachamim. So it's an amazing thing that Rachamim, Chesed, is not just a midah of Hashem. It is what Hashem is. It is the atzmius ha'bayri. Okay. I have to stop a little. Okay, we can do one more. Af shekayhanim akrivim karbanais mikol makam hatfila mutal alakail Shar Korban Havi B'Yisrael, V'Kohanim Shlichusayu Ko'avdin. So this is an interesting ha'ara of the Gra. We often say that tefillahs are a makeup. It's machlekes in the Gemara. What is the source of davening 3 times a day? One Mandi Amar says the tefillahs come from the avos. I don't mean the nusach, but the idea of davening 3 times a day. That Avram was masakein shachris, Yitzchak mincha, Yaakov ma'ariv. There's another Mandi Amar that says the tefillahs take the place of korbanos. So we don't have a Beis HaMikdash. So Shachris is keneged, the korban tamid of the morning. Mincha is keneged, the korban tamid shel bein ha'arbayim. Now ma'ariv, there were no korbanos brought at ma'ariv, but we say if there were leftover fats that were not totally burnt in the day, so we're allowed to burn them all night. Heter chalavim ve'evarim. So that's tefillas arvis. Now, it's an interesting question. I mean, did they daven when there was a Beis HaMikdash? I mean, like, if I say that tefillas are a makeup for korbanos, the implication would be, historically, that would mean there would be no reason. Now of course, if you state when a person had a particular reason to daven, of course they daven. I mean, Adam Arishan daven. I mean, it's not like there were no tefillas when there was a Beis HaMikdash, but I'm talking about daily, 3 times. If tefillas are b'makam avos, we would daven 3 times, even when there was a Beis HaMikdash. If tefillas are keneged korbanos, it's hard to understand why you would daven 3 times a day. I don't know. So l'chayra, that's a practical nafkamina in the opinions. Be it as it may, the Gra raises an interesting question. Let's assume that tefillas are keneged korbanos. Now, who brought the korbanos in the Beis HaMikdash? Only Kohanim. So l'chayra, if davening is a makeup for korbanos, then only Kohanim should have to daven. They're bringing the korban on behalf of Klal Yisrael. So so the Gra asks the kasha, if the tefillas are keneged korbanos, why is tefillah mutal al hakayil when you don't have a Beis HaMikdash? It should only be done by the Kohanim that are representative of Klal Yisrael. So interesting. Only a Kohen should have to daven. This will be a new excuse. If you're not a Kohen, you miss davening. Rebbe says, why weren't you at davening? He said, no. It's tefillah b'makam korbanos. The Kohen has to be there, not me. It's not a teretz for a Kohen, but you're not a Kohen. So the Gra says the following chiddush. The Gra says like this. The Gra says, although I'll give you a kasha on what the Gra says, that the emes is every Jew is mechuyev in avodah. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu allowed the Kohanim to be the shaliach, my shaliach, because because I'm not allowed to even enter. In other words, Hashem didn't want me to do the avodah. I'm not allowed to do the avodah. So Memela, since I'm not allowed to do the avodah, the Kohen functions as my shaliach. But the etzem de kechiyev is on me. So once we get to something that has no isser in me doing it, like davening, I'm mechuyev to do it, because mitzvah bo yoser mibishlucham. There's always a mitzvah for you to do more than your shaliach. So the avodah, I got to rely on a shaliach, because the Torah asers me to do it. But on something the Torah doesn't aser, mitzvah bay yoser mibishlucham, memela I have to daven, even though I'm not a kohen. So the Gra says, so the Yesod HaDvarim is that avodah gufa is really on the Yisrael, but he's yaitse through the Kohanim, because the Kohen is our shaliach. So what's fascinating is, again, I'd have to look up the Makar. I mean, there's no question the Gra probably addressed this, but I don't know. I just know the quote here. Is the Gemara itself has the Shaila. The Gemara asks the Shaila, are Kohanim the Shaluchim of Am Yisrael? or are the Kohanim the shluchim of Hashem in bringing the korbanos? And the Gemara's maskana actually is, Kohanim are not our shluchim. And this is what the Gemara says. You can't make a shaliach to do something that you yourself can't do. In other words, we say, if I could do something, I could marry, I could be Hakodesh a woman, I could be Megarish a woman, I could sell a field, I could buy a field. So anything that I have the kayach to do, I can transfer that kayach to a shaliach. Shaluchai shel adam kamaisai. I have a kayach of kedushin, I have a kayach of gershon, I have a kayach of mechira, I have a kayach of keniya. I make you a shaliach to act for me. Anything I can do, well, not anything, some things I can't make a shaliach. Chalitza, for example, gezerah sakasib, you cannot make a shaliach. But most things, if I'm able to do it, I can make a shaliach to do it. Mechiras chametz. But the predicate is, it has to be something I'm able to do. Now, I'm a Yisrael. I can't do the Avodah. If I can't do the Avodah, how can I make a Kohen a shaliach for me? I don't have that koyach. So the Gemara says it's mukhrach that a Kohen is not a shaliach of the Yisrael. The Kohen has an independent power given by God. That's what it means, a shaliach of God. Meaning, Hashem, in other words, shalichus would mean he gets his power from me. But it's not shaykh for him to get his power from me because I don't have the power. He must get his power from Hashem. So it's fascinating that the Gra is using the very tzad that the Gemara rejects. The Gra says, oh, you got to daven because Kohanim are your shaluchim. And therefore, mitzvah bo yosim ribi shluchim. Fakir, the Gemara declares, are Kohanim our shaluchim? Or are they shluchim of Hashem? And the Gemara's maskana is, they're shluchim of Hashem because I don't have the power to do the Avodah. Right? So this is fascinating that the Gra is typhus as a teretz, an actual tzad in the Gemara that the Gemara itself slugs up. There's no question that, I'm not even calling this a kasha on the Gra because there's no question that the Gra probably addresses it. I'll see if I can look up the original Makor. But I just want to point out that if you just learned the Even Shelaima, you wouldn't realize that this teretz of the Gra is actually contradicting the Gemara. But okay, Beseder. But this is his teretz of why, if you're not a Kohen, you have to daven, because the Kohen is your shaliach, and since mitzvah bo yosim b'shlucho, it's better for you to daven than to have a shaliach. Of course, you can daven through a shaliach if you have to. That's what Chazaras Hashatz is, right? Chazaras Hashatz is gebayt on the idea that if a person did not know how to daven, although you see, it is interesting though, just to contrast halachically, Tefillah is a little different. If I don't know how to make Kiddush, so you can make Kiddush for me. I can make you a shaliach to make Kiddush for me. Now, I don't need a minyan for that. We're just two guys alone. I can ask him, make Kiddush for me. For Tefillah, even though there is a shalichus, right, shaliach tzibur, but Chazaras Hashatz has halachas. I mean, let's assume it's just you and me. I don't know how to daven. I don't have a sitter, whatever. And I ask you, can you say Shemona Esrei for me? And I'll listen, and I'll say Amen. Just like Kiddush. Can you say Kiddush for me? And I'll listen, and I'll say Amen. The answer is yes. Can you say Shemona Esrei for me? And I'll answer Amen. The answer actually is no. That Chazaras Hashatz was a miyuchadika takana that only applied b'tzibur. It does not apply b'yachid. So it's an interesting question that Tefillah does not have the normal rules of shlichus. Maybe there's a special takana for the tzibur. So it's an interesting question. Why? Just ponder. Why is davening different than benching or kiddush or havdalah, where one person can do it for somebody without a minyan having to be present? But Chazaras Hashatz is totally gebayt. It's totally built on the notion of a tzibor. If there's no tzibor, there is no chazaras Hashem. I don't mean kedusha. I understand. I mean, I'm not asking, I'll daven for you and I'll say kedusha. I understand kedusha needs a minyan, but why would tefillah need a minyan? Meaning, I have to daven, you have to daven. If I can't daven without you saying it for me, then why can't you do the equivalent of a chazaras hashatz without kedusha? It's a good question, something to think about. Okay, stop here and have a good Shabbos.